Day 1, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. I found this picture on Pinterest that really stood out for me. First, I gave him some nice thick eyebrows and then a very large nose. Then I changed his neutral lips into more of a smirk because that was the vibe he was giving me. After that, I drew his hoodie and baggy pants. However, I forgot to add the pockets on the pants. He definitely felt like a grass-type Pokemon trainer who would cause a little bit of mischief. So, his Pokemon is going to be Pansage, and I put him on his shoulder. Would you like me to draw you as a Pokemon trainer? Day 2, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Here is another picture from Pinterest. I really like the clothing she was wearing, and how she's posing really stood out for me. I accidentally made her head too big, however, but it still works in this case. But when I was drawing the legs, I didn't realize her pants were flared at the bottom, so she just has some normal jeans. Then I drew out the rest of her body, making sure I get her sleeves to look like the picture. To me, it felt like she would have a normal type Pokemon. So after scrolling a list of normal type Pokemon, I came across Castform and placed it right behind her shoulder. Fill out the Google form in my bio if you would like me to draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 3, turning random people into Pokemon trainers. I found this really unique photo on Pinterest. First, I tried to emphasize his tired looking eyes, but I didn't know how to draw the rope around his head, so it kind of turned out like a bandana. Drawing his hair was really fun. Kind of reminded me of Goku's hair a little bit. Then I drew out his fluffy jacket. As for his Pokemon, I wanted to give him a grass and dark type, but there were only so many to choose from, so I felt like Shiftry was the right move to go. Would you like me to draw you as a Pokemon trainer? Day 4, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. First, I drew as a Pokemon Hippopotas. Then I drew the Pokemon trainer behind him. Next, I added some shading around Hippopotas and our trainer. Finally, I added some light pencil shading around Hippopotas. Comment below if you would like me to draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 5, turning random people into Pokemon trainers. First, I started off with our trainer's head. But I really messed up on the eyes, so I redrew it and I was really happy with how the second one looked. Then I drew out the rest of her body. She felt like she would have a very small bird Pokemon next to her, so I went with Hoot-Hoot. Originally, I wanted her to have Hoot-Hoot above her hat, but I kind of ran out of space, so I ended up putting another Hoot-Hoot on her hand. Comment below your favorite Pokemon, and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Draw me! You got it, your dad says hi. This is day 6 of drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. First, I drew out the head, and I really wanted to make sure that I got her braid in this drawing. Then I made my way down to her body, but instead of having her stand up, I had her more in a more relaxed pose. One of your dad says hi's favorite Pokemon is Snorlax, so I drew Snorlax behind her, making sure he's giving a big wave. I added lots of shading with Snorlax and our Pokemon trainer. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 7, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Big Daddy Vlad wanted me to draw him with Arbok. First, I drew out his head, but I accidentally made his head way too big for the page, so I had to stop just below his shoulders. Next, I drew Arbok wrapping around him. Then I added some shading around Arbok and our Pokemon trainer. Finally, I finished by adding in some more details around Arbok. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 8, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Anita's favorite Pokemon is Jolteon, so let's draw her with Jolteon. First, I drew out Jolteon's head and body, but I made his head way too big, but that's okay. Then I drew out Anita's head just above Jolteon. Next, I added some shading and changed the line weight. Finally, I added some color to our trainer and Jolteon. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 9, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Today, I am drawing this sexy bee, aka myself. First, I drew out my head and really making sure I get the narrow eye. Then I gave myself a hoodie and added some shading around myself. One of my favorite Pokemons is Metagross, but he was so hard to make, I kind of messed up a little bit. I actually wanted him to be a little bit bigger, but because he was so hard to make, this will do. Then I added some more shading around Metagross and colored in his eyes. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 10, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. This is my Australian friend Sarah. This pose is really hard to do, so I had to outline it first just to make sure I got it right. Then I drew out all of Sarah's facial features. Then I made my way down to her body. After I completed the body, I drew out her favorite Pokemon, Bulbasaur. Then I erased everything to ink in the shadows of this drawing. Finally, I colored in Bulbasaur's eyes red and gave a green outline around Bulbasaur and our trainer. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 11, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Wiseclaw wanted me to draw him with Cerulege, but his profile picture is literally Soundwave from Transformers. So this one gave me some trouble. After I outlined everything into boxes and cylinders, I began adding in more detail of Soundwave, but there was so much detail in here that it took me so long. Then after I got all the detail, I drew out Cerulege above his head, trying to keep him small because I know Cerulege would be super small compared to Soundwave. Finally, I added some color with some watercolor paint. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 12, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Kai the goalie wanted me to draw him with Greninja. Kai likes to play lacrosse, so I really wanted to get him playing lacrosse in the drawing. At first I tried drawing his face and the mask together, but I didn't like the way how the mask was covering his face, so I erased it and put it above his head instead. After drawing out the rest of his body, I drew out Greninja. Finally, I added some watercolor around Greninja and our trainer, only to completely botch the skin tones on our trainer. My bad. At least Greninja looks pretty cool. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 13, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Ranting Vortex wanted me to draw him with Fungus. First, I drew out a very relaxed pose, kind of like he's leaning against a tree. Then I added the details of his face and head, but his hair was really hard, so I kind of messed up on that. Then I worked my way down the body. Next, I put Fungus right next to Ranting Vortex. After that, I added some shading around our Pokemon trainer and Pokemon. Finally, I finished it off by adding some color. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 14, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Plot Thoughts wanted me to draw him with Dialga, but he's literally just letters. So how can I do this? First, I drew out the letters of his profile picture. Then I gave him a very basic head, kind of like a background character in an anime. Then I made my way down to his body, keeping everything super basic. After that, I drew Dialga right behind him. Finally, I added some color to Dialga. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 15, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Blaze Not a Pro wanted me to draw him with Skeledirge. First, I drew out Skeledirge, and I probably should have outlined this first, but I decided to just head right into the drawing. Then after making Skeledirge, I put Blaze Not a Pro right behind Skeledirge. After that, I added in all the shadows to our trainer and Skeledirge. Finally, I added some nice red color to our trainer and Skeledirge. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Biffy wanted me to draw him with Charizard. Now, I wanted this pose to make it look like he's pointing Charizard into battle, but based on the profile picture, he actually doesn't have a body. I had to draw a body from imagination. After I drew out the body, I drew Charizard right behind him, looking like he's flying into battle. Next, I added in all the shadows and shading to our trainer and Pokemon. Finally, I added all the color to Charizard and outlined it all in purple. And I thought this one came out really good. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 17, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Lucas Bricks wanted me to draw him as a Pokemon trainer, but leave the Pokemon a surprise. I'm always up for a challenge. Lucas Bricks is literally just a Lego. So I took the shapes of the Legos, but altered it to make it look a little bit more human, but I kept the hands. Now, Lucas Bricks seems to like Star Wars, so he needed a psychic type Pokemon. And what better psychic type Pokemon than Mr. Mime? After I added in all the shading, I drew out a little rock floating in space. Finally, I added lots of color to our trainer and Mr. Mime. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 18, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Smalls4K has been asking for a little bit now to draw him with Voltorb. He has a very interesting profile face, so this was pretty fun to make. Now, Smalls4K doesn't have a body in his profile pic, but I wanted to add one anyway, making it very long and lanky. Then I added Voltorb right next to him, making sure he's extra angry. After I made Voltorb, I added some shadows around the face of our trainer and Voltorb to give it a little bit extra spice. Finally, adding the color was pretty easy because these colors were pretty simple. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 19, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Truly Unforgettable has been waiting 4 days for me to draw him, so it's about time I draw him. Once I finished his face, I drew out the rest of his body, especially emphasizing his scarf, and gave him some tiny little legs. After that, I added Zacian right behind our trainer. Although I don't draw legendaries all too often, this one came out pretty decent, I think. Next, I added in the shadows around our trainer and Zacian. Finally, I hit it with some watercolor. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 20, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Real Sir Bob wanted me to draw him with Rayquaza. Now, Real Sir Bob is literally just a stick figure with a top hat, but I wanted to give him a little cane and a little bit of more muscle as well. Now, Rayquaza is a cool Pokemon, but I really don't like drawing him. He kind of sucks to draw. I even messed up on his head like 3 different times on this, and I had to make adjustments to those mistakes. And even drawing his body is quite the pain in the butt to me. He's just such a big Pokemon and so many features, it's very easy to mess up. I definitely think the watercolor on this is kind of saving the drawing a little bit. Not my favorite, but it came out decent. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 21, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Ivan the Tech wants me to draw him. First, I drew out a very large head. Then I drew out the suit that Ivan is wearing, but I didn't know what to do for the arms, so I left it out for now. Now, Ivan wants the Pokemon Lapras, so I put Lapras right below him, but I made his body way too big, but we'll just say Lapras has been eating a lot. Then I finished adding in the arms on Ivan, added some shading, then I added the watercolor. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 22, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. I Love Dandy's World says it's his birthday and he wanted me to draw him. First, I drew out a very large head. Then I drew out the rest of his body, really trying to emphasize the lean in the photo. I Love Dandy's World wanted me to draw him with Torterra, so I drew Torterra right behind him to make sure I got it right. After that, I added lots of shading to our trainer and Torterra. By the way, I've been getting so many requests to draw people as Pokemon trainers that I simply can't keep up with every single one. That's why I decided to open a few commission slots. If you want to be drawn as a trainer, the link is in my bio. Can you pretty please draw me with Vulpix? Since you said please, this is day 23, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Wytho has actually been very patiently waiting for me to draw him. After I drew out a bunch of shapes for his body and head, I drew Vulpix right on top of his head. Then I added lots of shadows to Vulpix and our trainer. The last thing I did, of course, was add some watercolor. But getting Vulpix's colors was pretty tricky, so I got it as close as I could possibly get it. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 24, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Xavier wanted me to draw Mario as a Pokemon trainer, and I absolutely love this idea. I really wanted to draw Mario in some type of pose, like he's some type of action pose, like he's running. Xavier thinks that Mario would have Trico as his Pokemon, kind of like Yoshi. So I found a good pose that Trico was making and drew out Trico right on his arm. They kind of have similar noses. Then I added in all the shading around Trico and Mario. Then of course I hit it with some watercolor. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 25, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Nice Guy Asher, one of the OGs from my comment section, wanted me to draw him with Sirfetch'd, but there's just one problem. His profile picture is just an N. Now, because Sirfetch'd is kind of like a knight in itself, I figured I would give Nice Guy Asher a knight helmet as well. Then I gave him a little sword. After that, I drew Sirfetch'd right next to him. Then I added all the shadows. Finally, I added some color to Sirfetch'd. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Pikachu, please! This is day 26, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Despina wanted her with Pikachu. Because I haven't done a Pikachu yet, I thought now was a perfect opportunity. From the picture, it looks like Despina's wearing a hoodie, so I wanted to give her that as well. Originally, I was going to have her hand touching Pikachu, but because I made the head so big, I had to stop just short, and now she just looks like she's waving. Then I drew Pikachu right on top of her head, making him accidentally a little bit pudgy. Then I added all the shading. Finally, I hit it with some watercolor. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 27, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Gom has been very patiently waiting and it's finally time I drew him. Now, Gom doesn't actually have a body. His profile picture is literally just a floating head, but I wanted to give him a body anyway, making sure to really divide up the black and white halves. Gom wanted his Pokemon to be Wooper, and I put Wooper right on top of his top hat. Then I colored in every other side black, gave Wooper some watercolor, and added a bit of watercolor around Gom himself. Comment your favorite Pokemon, and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 28, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Peeled Artful has been waiting 9 days for me to draw him. Now I couldn't see Peeled Artful's whole body, but I figured his arms would be really long, with some long fingers and pretty stubby legs. Peeled Artful wanted his Pokemon to be Xurkitree, I think. I've never heard this Pokemon before. And he was pretty tough to make because he doesn't have eyes to make a center for his head. Then I added in some cross hatching around Peeled Artful and then Xurkitree as well. Finally, there wasn't too much watercolor to give him. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 29, drawing random people as Pokemon trainers. Today we are doing Win Johnson, who wants his Pokemon to be Milotic. This one was pretty fun to make. I really wanted to emphasize his hoodie and the soda that he's drinking. But before I could add his legs, I needed to draw Milotic wrapping around him. Then I gave some tiny little legs and finished wrapping Milotic around it. Although I made Milotic really skinny, so we'll just say this Milotic is rather on the small side. Finally, I hit it with some watercolor. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer. Day 30, drawing random people as Pokemon trainer. Kelly Gates wants me to draw her with Aggron, and because that's my mom's name, I figured why not. The only problem is Kelly only has a K for her profile picture. So I put the K on her face and tried to make her body really small because Aggron is a big Pokemon. Now I drastically underestimated how hard Aggron was going to be because this was really hard to make. Then I added in lots of shading around Aggron. Now instead of doing the classic black color for Aggron, I went with the shiny version because that was quicker for me to do. Comment your favorite Pokemon and I'll draw you as a Pokemon trainer.